All right, Nick, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. Free agency has kind of winded down. The first phase is over, and the Raiders have made a ton of really smart moves. We broke down some of those moves today, just showing how smart they were for the Raiders and how well they helped out in spots where they were deficient last season. We're going to break it down in just a second, but first, I'm Andrew. That's Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, the Raiders did a lot of really great things in free agency, but I don't think people understand how good some of these moves actually were. First, before we jump into the analysis, let's jump into the moves just so people can refresh all of the moves because they made a lot of them. Let's get on into it. So, this a list of all of the moves, whether trading, retaining, re signing, or signing for the first time. It says the Raiders traded for Geno Smith from the Seahawks. They've got edge Max Crosby retained to a 3-year, $106 million deal. Defensive tackle Adam Butler's back. Edge Malcolm Kuntz is back. Safety Isaiah Polamalu is back. Landon Roberts. Cornerback Darnay Holmes is back. Then re-signings, guys who came back for the first time for the Raiders. They just signed them this year. Safety Jeremy Chin. Guard Alex Kappa. Cornerback Eric Stokes. Running back Raheem Mostert. And safety Lonnie Johnson Jr. And there's some of their years and dollar amounts related to their deals as well, if you'd like to look at those. But let's jump into the analysis and break down exactly what these moves did and how good they were for the Raiders. So first, we see the Raiders in 2024, what their grade was. In the middle, we have the player, and then finally on the right, we have what that player graded out last year versus how much value did they bring to the team. So we see here first, Geno Smith is up. The Raiders' passing grade last year, not very good, 57.9. They constantly switching between quarterbacks, trying to figure things out. And we can see, no matter who you are, you can realize 57.9, if, like Nick always says, you go back to school, and that's not a very good grade. That's an F. So the Raiders made the signing of Geno Smith, 81.9 passing grade for Geno Smith last year, with a value of plus 24 points. That's absolutely absurd. We've done a lot of these this year so far. I don't think anyone has been over the plus 20 mark yet so far. So plus 24, really, really great for Geno Smith. Then get down to the rushing grade, run grade per PFF, 56.5 last year. Raiders couldn't get it done. They didn't really recover very well with the departure of Josh Jacobs. They need to bring in someone else to really help elevate the run game. Raheem Mostert, he's the guy. 70.4 rushing grade last year for PFF with a plus 13.9 addition to this team. Very good. That's a strong grade for him. Then finally, Jeremy Chin, the safety, comes in. Raiders, pretty bad at tackling last year. Probably the thing that the worst at overall last year was tackling, a 40.2 grade in the tackling department for the Raiders. Jeremy Chin, though, pretty good at tackling. He's a pretty dang good player overall, but he's good at tackling, a 77.1 tackling grade. And get this, I talked about the 24, 36.9 plus 36.9 addition to this team with Jeremy Chin coming in, which is just crazy. First of all, the Raiders were just that bad, but Jeremy Chin being pretty good as well. This is a huge addition to this Raiders team. I don't think people understand just how big it is. Nick, I broke them down. I know you got some thoughts on these guys, but before we get to you, Raiders fans, in the comment section below, is there any other players that you think the Raiders have added that are big additions, or the players that we added? Did you know how big these additions were? Who do you think is going to make the biggest impact for this team going forward? Let us know in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about these latest additions by the Raiders?
When the Raiders were so active in the early phases of free agency, obviously when they acquired Geno Smith and made some of the other moves that you mentioned, a lot of people wondering, were more dominoes going to drop? Were they just going to keep going through the entire month of March? And it really didn't happen. It slowed down. But when you look at the numbers, you realize it's because they crushed it in the first few days and weeks of free agency. I don't think people understand the scale of improvement that has happened with the Raiders. If you look at just the Geno Smith deal alone and compared against what the Raiders were doing last year in PFF grade, that mass jump. That's the difference between drafting in the top 10, like the Raiders obviously are, and being a 10-win team. I'll pull up the numbers according to PFF. Any team that graded out at 81.9 passing or higher last season, every single one of them had double-digit wins except for the Cincinnati Bengals. They finished 9-8. That's the difference between being a bottom 10 team and a top 10 team right there. Even the Seattle Seahawks, they had double digit wins last year. So that move by itself, the Raiders just went from not a good team to a good team overnight. I honestly didn't realize the jump was that significant. It proves that Spytech and company and Brady, they know what the heck they're doing. Phenomenal work there. But then when you go into the other two moves, the Mostert upgrade was very significant, and they're probably going to do more on top of that in the draft. So they're going to go from the worst running team in 2024, according to PFF. They've already leaped up about 5, 6 spots. A running back in the draft, a good one if they get it right, which I think they will based on the moves the front office is making so far, will jump them up another 5, 6 points. So they'll go from being the worst in the NFL at running the football in 2024, according to PFF, to middle of the pack or even better in 2025. That's absolutely massive. And then tackling. They were terrible at tackling last year. That 40 grade is just absolutely atrocious. They bring in Jeremy Chin, kind of an underrated player in the National Football League. He is a phenomenal tackler in the secondary. Great job to fill in on the Raiders, and they'll get a whole lot better in tackling. For those of you who don't understand, if you look at tackling grade, the highest ranked team in tackling in the NFL in 2024 was the Kansas City Chiefs, 75.9 overall as a team. If you look at Chin's grade at 77, that will push the Raiders. Obviously, it's one guy. He's not going to push it all the way up there, but he'll push the Raiders up significantly closer to the top of the NFL. They'll have to add more pieces to improve the tackling component, but they're going to get a massive delta right there in the positive direction just by the addition of Jeremy Chin. And this just speaks to what the Raiders have been doing this offseason, right? There's been a lot of flash, obviously, Carroll, Spytech, Brady conversations, what's going on at the quarterback. They get Geno Smith, a lot of things happening, a lot of big names. And then, like I said, it just kind of stopped. And I know a lot of people are wondering, well, what's the next shoe to drop? Honestly, there doesn't need to be. They just need to do a good job in the draft. This team has gone from a double digit losing team, double digit losses, to I think really good spot to get double digit wins next year. That fast. They've got a lot of holes still to address, but people forget they've got a lot of really good young players. You look at Kuntz coming back, that obviously is huge. We're big fans. Wilkins should be healthy. Crosby's a beast, of course. You look at up front the offensive line, you got JPJ, who we think's a star. DJ Glaze is getting better and better. We covered them a lot. We all know Brock Bowers is a superstar already in the National Football League. They need to add probably a few more weapons on the outside, but honestly, the structure of what the team could do to get to 8, 9, 10 wins is already there based on these moves alone. This is an incredible job by Spytech and the entire Raiders front office. I don't think people are giving this enough attention. I know I'm not. Like when these moves were made, I thought, that's solid, good moves. Good job. This is good work, Las Vegas. But now that you actually break down the numbers and look at the data, it's like, whoa, this is an incredible job by the new leadership for the Raiders.
Yeah, Nick, and it's like I said, we did a few of these already, and we did the number. I don't think any of these teams cracked over, like, I think 17 plus 17 was the highest differentiator we saw in values on these teams. So for the Raiders to hit two moves, one, Geno Smith being plus 24, then finally Chin being plus 36, that's just crazy. They did it really, really right this free agency cycle. It's like you said, these guys went out and everyone's saying, okay, we made some moves. We're starting in the right direction. If you think about it, it is hard to conceptualize it in this way. Geno Smith brought as much value to the Raiders as two players did to other teams, where Jeremy Chin brought as much value to the tackling game as three players did to some other teams. So, I mean, it's not exactly like that, but just to understand how big of jumps these were. This was absolutely crazy for the Raiders to get this much value, and people kind of undervalued the players that they were getting. It felt like, you know, Geno Smith he wasn't as highly touted as he should have been this free agency cycle. I know a lot of people are looking at him, but there's so many other quarterbacks around the league that I think people were averaging as good as he was, or at least somebody that was a little bit above him, even so. So I mean, people were looking at Aaron Rodgers, people looking at Sam Darnold, saying, "Oh, these are the guys we need to go get." No, Geno Smith was the guy, and we can see it here with the Raiders. This was a really great move by them. Obviously, Pete Carroll, knowing Geno Smith, that was a big part. They knew how it would affect this team, what he brought to the table. So kudos for them for being able to do that. But it's like you said, as the landscape unfolds, this Raiders team is looking really good. And I agree with you. I think the draft is the next big indicator for the Raiders. I think they need to reassess, and I think they'll make some big moves in the draft as well. And you do this to me, Nick, but I'm going to do it to you this time. Looking at this Raiders team, seeing how it is structured right now, I don't know if you can see it or not. You pull it up. What do you think the next big shooter drop is for the Raiders in the draft? What position group do you think is the best for them to go ahead and assess in the draft? Or is there multiple things that you think they could get taken care of through the draft as well?
So I'm tempted to go running back receiver, but I really don't like going running back receiver in the top 10 unless there's somebody special, like a Brock Bowers kind of phenom kind of guy. I think the best move for the Raiders is to try and trade back out of the top 10. Maybe a team is trying to reach and get a quarterback, or there's a run on some of these defensive players and a team feels desperate to move into the top 10. I like the Raiders trading back to that 12 to 17 range, whether they get Gianti, whether they get, Hampton or something like that in the second round, or maybe they have to get him in the first, depending how it all shakes out. The running back position, there's a healthy amount of receivers. I like McMillan out of Arizona personally. I think he's a physical phenom. There's a lot of really good players coming out of coming out of the draft. Egbuka, excuse me, from Ohio State, if I can say his name correctly. I think he's a little underrated of a prospect. He's not as big a name as some of the other Ohio State receivers, but he'd be a good addition. Basically, I don't want the Raiders to be too aggressive in the top 10. I like them to trade back, get some more assets, and really nail down the running back and wide receiver position in the upcoming draft. But I want to circle back here to the quarterback position to understand how significant this deal was. Can you go back to that 24-point incremental passing grade increase and how absolutely bonkers that is? So for people who aren't too familiar with PFF, the general structure is 10 points is a key standard of deviation in different categories. So, for example, if a player grades in the 60s, that's usually a replacement level kind of player. In the 70s, that's a quality starter. In the 80s, that's a Pro Bowl, All Pro. He's a star. In the 90s, that's Hall of Fame stuff, right? Right. Crosby is in the high 80s, early 90s. You look at a guy like Aaron Donald's in the 90s. Micah Parsons is in the 90s, right? That's Hall of Fame stuff. When you look at what the Raiders have done here, this massive leap, they've gone from being below replacement level in the 50s, that's bad, to essentially Pro Bowl stuff overnight, and they gave up a third round pick to do it, whatever dollars they have to sign Geno Smith to if they want to lock him up long term. To give you some context beyond how bonkers this absolutely is, if you go back to 2021, the Los Angeles Rams traded Jared Goff and a bunch of draft picks, including a first round pick, to the Lions to get Matthew Stafford. They gave up a lot of assets. The difference in passing grade between those two teams, the Lions had a passing grade 3, not 30, 3 points better than the Los Angeles Rams. And the Rams, one of the smarter teams in football, still felt that it was so critical to make that 3 point improvement, right? And they gave up all those assets to acquire Stafford. The Raiders got what, a 24-point improvement, 8 times that level of improvement that the Rams did in 2021, and they give up a third round pick, right? These kind of deals are just franchise altering stuff. Now, is Geno Smith a long-term answer at quarterback? Look, probably not, just because of his age, right? And he does have some limitations. But overnight, this is one of the things people are forgetting. They're sleeping on the Raiders, me included, by the way. They've become a good team just with this. And then you look at their other moves, suddenly they're a better tackling team, right? Suddenly they're a better running team. And I think they have a great job and a great opportunity in the draft to crush it and do a great job. This Raiders team is trending in the right direction. They're not making a lot of headline moves, at least for the past few weeks. I think it's because they're gearing up for the draft now. But look, this is why you bring in Spy Tech. This is why you bring in Pete Carroll. This is what Tom Brady has helped deliver. It's stability, it's smart decisions, it's a great process. And this Raiders team, my goodness, like we talked about the culture getting better, Antonio Pierce. We were hoping that was going to turn him around. It unfortunately didn't. Where you thought Antonio Pierce got too short of a leash or not, that's up for debate. But the reality is, when you look at the moves the Raiders have been making and just on paper, on analytics, they've gone from a bottom 10 team to a team that could be contending for a playoff spot overnight.